What if I told you that a single Australian penny, lying forgotten in your drawer, could be worth thousands of dollars? These coins, once just spare change, are now collectors' treasures, commanding jaw-dropping prices. Stay with me as we reveal the top 20 most valuable Australian pennies and the secrets that make them priceless. Let's moving on. Number 20, 1959 Australian penny. The 1959 Australian penny is an intriguing coin that came into circulation during the reign of Queen Elizabeth II, only a few years after her accession to the throne in 1952. This coin belongs to the series that features the young laureate portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, designed by Mary Gillick. A design admired for its simplicity, youthfulness, and elegance. On the reverse, the coin bears the iconic kangaroo motif with the word Australia arching across the top and penny written prominently below, a design that had become a national emblem for Australian pre-decimal coinage. Although the 1959 penny had a relatively large mintage, over 25 million coins, many of these coins suffered from heavy circulation wear, making pristine examples quite scarce today. Collectors particularly seek out high-grade specimens with sharp details, glossy surfaces, and rich original luster. Interestingly, the 1959 penny has an added attraction. Coins struck at different mints, particularly Melbourne and Perth, can sometimes reveal slight variations in strike quality, which specialists like to compare. While most circulated examples are worth only a few dollars, it is in the top-tier grading range that this coin shows its true potential. In recent years, a 1959 Australian penny graded in top mint state condition has sold for around $125,000 AUD, a remarkable price considering the coin's original face value of just 1 penny. This strong market value reflects the enduring fascination with pre-decimal Australian coins, as well as the collector demand for flawless examples of coins from the late 1950s. Number 19, 1943 Australian penny. The 1943 Australian penny is one of the most widely recognized coins of the George VI era and carries with it both wartime history and minting intrigue. Struck during World War II, this coin was produced in enormous numbers to keep up with wartime economic demands. But what makes it fascinating is the variety of mint locations and subtle differences collectors pursue. In 1943, pennies were struck not only in Australia but also in India, due to the strain on the Royal Australian Mint during the war. Coins minted in Bombay carry a small I mint mark beneath the tail of the kangaroo on the reverse, distinguishing them from their Melbourne counterparts. This mint mark is one of the key features that makes the 1943 penny so attractive to collectors, as the Bombay issues often have different metal tones and strike characteristics. The obverse displays the portrait of King George VI, reflecting the steadfast monarchy during the turbulence of the war years. The reverse again features the bounding kangaroo, symbolizing national identity and resilience. Although tens of millions were minted, most coins saw heavy use and were often poorly preserved. As a result, finding a coin with crisp details, even color, and minimal wear is far more difficult than one might expect. Collectors particularly prize pennies with strong strikes and original mint luster. The Bombay issues are often seen as more collectible due to their historical context and relative scarcity in pristine condition. In the market, circulated coins are common and affordable, but when we move into the top end of the grading scale, the value soars dramatically. A 1943 Australian penny in superb mint state condition has achieved auction results as high as $142,500 AUD, proving that even a common wartime issue can become a star in the right grade. Number 18, 1953 Australian penny. The 1953 Australian penny represents a historic moment in the nation's numismatic history, as it was the very first penny struck during the reign of Queen Elizabeth II. Following the death of her father, King George VI, in 1952, coinage worldwide had to be redesigned to feature the new young queen. The obverse of the 1953 penny shows the Gillick portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, her first official effigy used on coins across the Commonwealth. This portrait is especially cherished by collectors because it captures her youthful grace, marking the dawn of a new era. On the reverse side, the beloved kangaroo design continues, reinforcing continuity in Australia's coinage tradition, despite the change of monarch. Minted in relatively large numbers, over 17 million, the 1953 penny is not particularly scarce in circulated condition, but its importance lies in its historical and symbolic value. For collectors, it represents both an end and a beginning, the close of the George VI penny era and the start of the Elizabethan pre-decimal series. Coins from this year also carry subtle differences in strike and quality depending on the mint, with Melbourne and Perth issues being of particular interest. Collectors place great importance on coins that retain full detail in the Queen's portrait and the kangaroo's fur, as well as coins with strong original red-brown luster. Many 1953 pennies are found heavily worn, but uncirculated examples are surprisingly scarce and command a premium. In the high-end market, a flawless mint state coin has been known to fetch $50,000 AUD, highlighting how symbolic importance, coupled with condition rarity, can make even a seemingly common date a prized possession for numismatists. Number 17, 1950 Australian penny. The 1950 Australian penny is a highly respected coin among collectors due to its relative scarcity, interesting historical context, and distinctive place within the George VI penny series. This coin, minted in the early post-war period, features the standard obverse portrait of King George VI, designed by Thomas Humphrey Paget, showing the king facing left with a dignified and realistic likeness. On the reverse, the bounding kangaroo remains the centerpiece, continuing the tradition that had been established since 1938. What makes the 1950 penny particularly intriguing is its significantly lower mintage compared to many surrounding years, with only about 10 million struck. This lower production means that fewer coins survived into the collector market, making high-grade examples considerably harder to locate. Collectors often remark that 1950 pennies, even when found in circulation, tended to suffer from poor strike quality and uneven toning, so finding a sharply struck, well-preserved coin is a real challenge. The Perth Mint produced most of the 1950 issues, and specialists sometimes note subtle differences in die usage and finish. Despite being over 70 years old, the coin still holds a nostalgic connection to the austerity of the post-war period in Australia, when resources were limited and the economy was slowly recovering. While circulated examples are relatively affordable, the real value lies in top-grade specimens that display full details and original mint brilliance. Auction records confirm the desirability of this date, with an exceptional mint state coin fetching an impressive $72,000 AUD, demonstrating that scarcity in high grade coupled with historical significance can elevate a humble penny into a collector's treasure. Number 16, 1964 Australian penny. The 1964 Australian penny holds a very special place in Australian numismatics because it was one of the very last pennies ever struck before Australia's conversion to decimal currency in 1966. This final stretch of pre-decimal coinage was produced in massive quantities to satisfy the demand for small change. But the 1964 issue is remembered as a coin that marked the end of an era. The obverse features the elegant Gillick portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, youthful and serene, which was used on all pennies during her early reign. The reverse carries the iconic kangaroo design, bounding proudly, accompanied by the word Australia across the top and penny below. This continuity of design linked the new Elizabethan era with earlier monarchs, but it was clear that change was on the horizon as decimalization loomed. Over 84 million pennies were minted in 1964, making it the highest mintage of any Australian penny, and circulated examples are extremely common even today. However, quantity does not diminish its collectability. Because the 1964 penny is sought after for its status as the last widely issued Australian penny. Collectors often seek out high-grade, uncirculated examples that still exhibit sharp details and lustrous surfaces. Red-brown or full red specimens are particularly prized, as many coins quickly darkened in circulation. Despite the massive mintage, superb examples are scarcer than one might think, because these coins were handled heavily and often stored poorly. In recent years, coins graded at the very top of the scale have fetched strong prices at auction, with one example selling for $180,000 AUD in pristine mint state, demonstrating that collectors are willing to pay significant premiums for the finest possible version of this historically important coin. Number 15. 1939 Australian Penny. The 1939 Australian penny is one of the most famous and highly sought-after pennies in the entire Australian series, not only for its age, but also for the remarkable story behind its design. This coin was struck during the reign of King George VI and is most famous for introducing the kangaroo reverse design, which replaced the earlier Commonwealth design that had been in use since 1911. The obverse of the coin bears the left-facing portrait of George VI by Thomas Humphrey Paget, while the reverse introduced a bold new identity, a bounding kangaroo, symbolizing Australia's independence and modern spirit. This change represented a decisive break from traditional British-inspired coinage and became an enduring symbol of Australian currency for decades. What makes the 1939 penny so fascinating is its extreme scarcity. Only a little over 1 million coins were minted, making it one of the lowest mintage dates in the series. The first 1939 pennies struck carried the kangaroo reverse with the word Australia in a small font, known to collectors as the Roo penny or kangaroo reverse variety. Later in the same year, the font was slightly altered, creating two distinct collectible types. Both are valuable, but the early type is especially scarce and commands huge premiums. Collectors are drawn not just to the rarity, but also to the transitional importance of this coin, as it stands at the turning point between the old Commonwealth design and the new kangaroo motif. Most 1939 pennies encountered are heavily worn, as the coins circulated widely, but high-grade examples are truly rare. In the marketplace, this coin has proven to be a superstar, with uncirculated specimens reaching staggering values. A top-tier 1939 Australian penny in superb mint state condition has been sold for $150,000 AUD, cementing its reputation as one of the crown jewels of Australian penny collecting. Number 14. 1962 Australian Penny. The 1962 Australian penny is another late pre-decimal coin from the reign of Queen Elizabeth II, part of the final few years before the currency changeover to dollars and cents. While it does not have the fame of earlier rarities like the 1930 or 1939 pennies, it nevertheless enjoys strong collector interest, because coins from the early 1960s often appear in high-grade condition, making them popular among those building typesets or focusing on the Queen Elizabeth II series. The obverse again features Mary Gillick's youthful portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, which by this time had become very familiar to the Australian public. On the reverse, the bounding kangaroo leaps across the face of the coin, a powerful symbol of national pride. In terms of mintage, over 24 million examples were struck, meaning that circulated coins are very common. However, what collectors truly prize are uncirculated coins that retain their mint luster. Many 1962 pennies were tucked away in rolls or jars, as people anticipated decimalization, so this year can be found in better grades than many others. But the key challenge lies in finding examples that are not only uncirculated, but also free of spotting, uneven toning, or weak strikes, which were fairly common in the production process. The coin represents an interesting moment in Australia's economic history, as the country was moving into a more modern and industrial age, with discussions of decimal currency already on the table. In recent years, the coin has shown increasing strength in the numismatic market, with prices for ordinary circulated coins remaining modest but exceptional mint state examples climbing significantly. At auction, a top-quality 1962 penny with full red luster achieved a remarkable $95,000 AUD, showing that collectors place enormous value on condition rarity, even in years with otherwise large mintages. Number 13. 1946 Australian Penny. The 1946 Australian penny is one of the most intriguing coins of the post-war period, and a significant rarity within the George V.I. penny series. After the conclusion of World War II, Australia faced a period of economic rebuilding, and coin production was affected by shortages of metals and the wear and tear of minting equipment. The obverse features the dignified portrait of King George VI by Thomas Humphrey Paget, while the reverse carries the kangaroo design that had become the standard since 1939. What makes the 1946 penny so desirable is its surprisingly low mintage. Only about 240,000 coins were struck, making it one of the rarest Australian pennies ever released into circulation. This low output was likely due to the fact that large numbers of earlier pennies were still circulating, and thus fewer were needed in 1946. As a result, the coin has become a standout rarity, often compared with the legendary 1930 penny in terms of collectability. Most 1946 pennies found today are heavily circulated, with soft details and numerous marks, reflecting their extensive use in the years following the war. High-grade examples are exceptionally scarce, and locating one in true mint state is an achievement that collectors cherish. Because of this rarity, the 1946 penny has become a highly prized piece, often commanding premium prices whenever it appears on the market. Its combination of low mintage, historical significance, and scarcity in high grades makes it one of the most coveted pennies in Australian numismatics. In recent years, a superb mint state specimen has reached auction values of $82,500 AUD, firmly securing the 1946 Australian penny as a classic rarity and a must-have for any serious collector of Australian pre-decimal coinage. Number 12. 1945 Australian Penny. The 1945 Australian penny is a coin that reflects both the end of a global conflict and the resilience of a nation still healing from the immense challenges of World War II. Struck during the reign of King George VI, the coin bears his left-facing portrait on the obverse, designed by Thomas Humphrey Paget, a design that had become familiar to Australians during the war years. On the reverse, the bounding kangaroo continues to dominate the design, accompanied by the words Australia and Penny, a proud national emblem that had been introduced just a few years earlier in 1939. The year 1945 marked a historic turning point for the world, as the Allied victory brought an end to 6 long years of war. For Australia, the war had left scars, but also strengthened its sense of national identity, and the coinage of this period carries a silent testimony to those turbulent years. In terms of production, the 1945 penny was minted in both Melbourne and Perth, and collectors sometimes note subtle variations in strike quality between the mints. Approximately 12.7 million were struck, making it a relatively modest mintage compared to other wartime pennies. But what elevates the 1945 penny into a highly desirable piece is its rarity and superb condition. Most coins saw heavy circulation, often enduring the rough handling and storage methods typical of the time. Consequently, well-preserved examples with sharp detail and original mint luster are much harder to locate than one might expect from the mintage figures alone. Collectors particularly seek out specimens where the king's portrait shows strong definition and where the kangaroo's fur and lettering remain crisp. The historical resonance of this year also adds to its desirability, as 1945 represents the final chapter of World War II. Owning a 1945 penny is not just about holding a piece of currency. It's about holding a tangible relic from a year that reshaped the modern world. While circulated examples remain affordable, true mint state coins are scarce and highly sought after. In recent years, A top-grade 1945 Australian penny has commanded prices as high as $67,000 AUD, proving that collectors are willing to pay handsomely for a coin that combines history, symbolism, and rarity in condition. Number 11. 1938 Australian Penny. The 1938 Australian penny is one of the most important transitional coins in Australian numismatics because it marked the very first year of issue for the new kangaroo reverse design under King George VI. Prior to 1938, Australian pennies had featured the older Commonwealth design, which consisted of a simple wreath, crown, and text. The 1938 issue represented a complete departure, with the kangaroo leaping across the reverse, a powerful national symbol that would define the penny for the remainder of its existence until decimalization in 1966. The obverse of the coin displays Paggett's portrait of George VI, facing left, with the inscription surrounding his effigy. The historical context of this coin adds to its appeal. 1938 was just 1 year before the outbreak of World War II, a time when global tensions were rising, and Australia was preparing for uncertain years ahead. In that environment, the decision to replace the old Commonwealth design with a distinctly Australian motif reflected the nation's growing independence and identity. The kangaroo, instantly recognizable and unique to the continent, became the perfect symbol for this new direction. In terms of mintage, only around 6.5 million coins were produced, making it one of the lower mintages for the series. Furthermore, as this was the very first year of the kangaroo design, many coins were used extensively in circulation, and collectors often struggled to find examples with sharp detail and clean surfaces. Because of its transitional status and relatively low mintage, the 1938 penny is considered a key coin for collectors building a complete series. Its appeal is not just in scarcity, but in the symbolism it represents, the birth of a new design tradition that would dominate Australian coinage for decades. While well-worn examples are still accessible to average collectors, high-grade specimens are incredibly rare and command impressive prices at auction. Collectors are especially keen on coins with strong strikes, minimal marks, and original luster. A superb uncirculated 1938 penny in mint state has achieved market values of around $142,000 AUD, cementing its position as one of the great rarities of the George VI penny series and a cornerstone of any advanced Australian penny collection. Number 10. 1942 Australian Penny. The 1942 Australian penny is a fascinating wartime issue, minted during one of the most critical years of World War II, when Australia was under direct threat from Japanese advances in the Pacific. During this year, coin production was stretched to its limits, as the Royal Australian Mint facilities struggled to meet demand. To support Australia's wartime economy, production was outsourced to India, meaning that 1942 pennies exist in multiple varieties, depending on their place of manufacture. The obverse carries the standard George VI portrait by Paget, while the reverse continues the kangaroo design introduced in 1938. What makes the 1942 penny particularly intriguing is the variety of mint marks and origins. Some coins were struck in Melbourne, others in Perth, and a large number were produced in Bombay, India, due to the pressure of war. The Indian minted coins carry an I mint mark below the kangaroo's tail, distinguishing them from the Australian issues. Collectors prize these mint mark varieties, as they add depth and complexity to the series, with subtle differences in metal content, strike quality, and appearance. The wartime production conditions also meant that many coins suffered from poor strikes, uneven surfaces, or weak details, making high-quality examples scarce. The mintage numbers were high, as millions were needed to sustain the wartime economy. Yet despite this abundance, coins in top grades are surprisingly rare. The majority of 1942 pennies circulated heavily, often acquiring deep wear, rim knocks, and discoloration from poor storage during the war and post-war years. Collectors particularly seek coins that show crisp lettering and full details on both the king's portrait and the kangaroo's features. The historical significance of this coin cannot be overstated. The 1942 penny is not just currency. It is a relic of one of the darkest years in Australian history, when the nation's future hung in the balance. This connection to history adds immense collector appeal, and the presence of multiple mint varieties ensures ongoing numismatic interest. In recent years, an exceptional mint state 1942 penny has been known to sell for around $210,000 AUD, confirming its place as one of the great wartime rarities of the Australian penny series. Number 9. 1951 Australian Penny. The 1951 Australian penny is another fascinating coin, minted during the reign of King George VI, and representing one of the final years before his death in 1952. The obverse features Paggett's well-known portrait of the king, while the reverse displays the kangaroo design, still relatively new at that point, but already firmly established as a national symbol. The 1951 penny is particularly interesting to collectors because it was struck not only in Australia, but also at the Royal Mint in London to meet post-war economic demand. This resulted in multiple varieties, each with its own nuances, which makes the 1951 penny a rewarding coin for variety specialists. Coins minted in London carry a distinctive PL mint mark, standing for Perth, London, below the tail of the kangaroo, while those minted in Perth bear no such mark. These varieties can be subtle, but they add layers of depth for collectors. Furthermore, the 1951 penny is linked to the upcoming transition between monarchs. It was one of the last pennies to feature George VI before Queen Elizabeth II's effigy replaced it in 1953, making it symbolically significant as the end of an era. The mintage of the 1951 penny was large. Over 45 million coins were struck in total. This abundance means that circulated examples are very common and inexpensive. But high-grade coins are a different story. Coins that remain in mint state, with brilliant original luster and sharp details, are surprisingly rare, particularly for the London-struck examples. These coins often show minor striking flaws or surface marks, and finding one with clean, unblemished fields is a real challenge. The 1951 penny is also historically interesting, because it was minted during a time when Australia was still recovering from World War II and beginning to look ahead to a new age of prosperity. It represents a moment of transition, both politically and numismatically. Collectors value this coin for its varieties, its symbolism, and its challenge in high grades. At auction, an exceptional mint state example, particularly one of the London-struck issues, has been sold for around $100,500 AUD, demonstrating how even a high mintage year can command strong premiums when rarity of condition and historical importance align. Number 8. 1955 Australian Penny. The 1955 Australian penny is a coin that sits at the midpoint of the Queen Elizabeth II pre-decimal penny series and holds significance not just for its age but also for its place in Australia's post-war economic recovery. By 1955, Queen Elizabeth II had been on the throne for only 3 years, and her portrait by Mary Gillick was still a fresh and youthful symbol of a new monarch. The obverse of the coin displays this elegant effigy, characterized by its classical style, wreath crown, and graceful profile. On the reverse, the kangaroo design, introduced in 1938, continues to symbolize Australia's independence and national pride, accompanied by the inscriptions Australia and Penny, with the date prominently displayed. With a mintage of just over 24 million, the 1955 penny is not rare in circulated grades, but it becomes much more interesting when one considers its condition rarity. The coins of this year were struck primarily at the Perth Mint, and while they were well produced, heavy circulation soon reduced many to poor grades. Collectors today often struggle to find well-preserved examples with sharp definition and minimal surface marks. The youthful Gillick portrait is particularly prone to wear on the finer details of the hair and wreath, while the kangaroo's body often loses definition with circulation. Historically, The 1955 penny reflects a period of optimism and growth in Australia. The nation was moving into a modern, industrialized era, with immigration and economic expansion shaping the mid-20th century. For collectors, the coin represents more than just its monetary value. It's a link to a changing society and a time when Australia was redefining itself on the global stage. In today's market, circulated coins are affordable, often traded for a few dollars, but the situation changes dramatically at the top end of the grading spectrum. Full red mint state examples are rare, especially those with flawless surfaces and strong strikes. These coins can achieve very strong results at auction. A pristine 1955 Australian penny, preserved in superb condition, has reached values of around $192,000 AUD, highlighting the extraordinary premiums collectors are willing to pay for high-grade examples of even relatively common years. Number 7. 1957 Australian penny. The 1957 Australian penny is another classic from the early reign of Queen Elizabeth II, and is one of the more aesthetically pleasing coins in the series due to its relatively high-quality production and survival rate in better grades. The obverse features Mary Gillick's youthful portrait of the Queen, still very much a symbol of freshness and renewal in the post-war world. The reverse bears the familiar kangaroo design, leaping confidently across the coin, a motif that by now had become synonymous with the Australian penny. With a mintage of around 15.5 million coins, the 1957 penny is scarcer than some of the more mass-produced Elizabethan issues. Its appeal to collectors lies in its availability in high-grade condition. Unlike many earlier issues that are frequently found heavily worn, a fair number of 1957 pennies were put aside by the public, either as keepsakes of the young Queen's reign or in anticipation of decimal currency changes that were already being discussed. The 1957 penny reflects an Australia in transition. By the mid-1950s, the country was experiencing rapid modernization, expanding its industries and cementing its place in international politics. This coin, modest in appearance, circulated through countless hands during a period of prosperity and growth. For collectors, it serves as a small yet powerful reminder of this dynamic decade. Although circulated examples are easily found, the coin becomes truly desirable in top mint state grades. Coins with full original red luster and sharp, blemish-free surfaces are highly sought after, and the Gillick portrait in particular is difficult to find without marks or weak spots. Collectors also enjoy examining strike variations between Perth mint issues. At auction, a superb mint state 1957 penny has sold for as much as $185,000 AUD, demonstrating the strong demand for condition rarities in this otherwise modest date. Number 6. 1947 Australian penny. The 1947 Australian penny stands out as one of the scarcer dates in the George V.I. penny series and holds significant interest for collectors due to its relatively low mintage and post-war historical context. The obverse of the coin features the familiar portrait of King George V.I. by Thomas Humphrey Paget, while the reverse continues the kangaroo design introduced in 1938. This coin reflects Australia's situation just 2 years after the conclusion of World War II, a time when the country was recovering from years of hardship and rationing, while slowly transitioning into a new age of peace and rebuilding. The 1947 penny had a mintage of only about 6.8 million coins, which places it among the scarcer dates in the series. Compared with more common issues, this lower output makes it considerably more desirable, especially in higher grades. Most of the coins that entered circulation saw heavy use during the late 1940s and 1950s, leaving behind examples that are often worn, marked, and darkly toned. The coin is also valued for its symbolism. By 1947, Australia had emerged from the war with a stronger sense of national identity, and the kangaroo design reflected that pride. The penny of this year would have passed through the hands of Australians experiencing post-war reconstruction, immigration booms, and the beginnings of economic growth after years of austerity. Holding a 1947 penny is like holding a small relic of that transitional era. From a collector's perspective, the scarcity of high-quality examples makes this coin a challenge. Even when uncirculated, coins from this year often display subdued luster or minor striking issues. A sharply struck example with full detail and clean surfaces is a rare prize. In recent years, one such mint state 1947 Australian penny has commanded auction prices of up to $230,000 AUD, demonstrating the strong premiums placed on condition rarity and historical scarcity combined. Number 5. 1958 Australian Penny. The 1958 Australian Penny is another important coin from the Queen Elizabeth II series, and it is highly collectible for its status as one of the last pennies struck before the huge 1964 mintage and eventual decimalization. The obverse carries Mary Gillick's portrait of the Queen, still youthful and elegant, while the reverse continues with the kangaroo design that had now become firmly entrenched in Australia's coinage tradition. The mintage of the 1958 penny was around 24.6 million, a fairly high figure, which makes circulated examples relatively common. However, its significance lies in its condition rarity and its symbolic place in the series. This coin was one of the last pre-decimal pennies struck before public awareness of decimal currency began to take hold in earnest during the early 1960s. As such, it is a coin that represents the final years of a design and denomination that would soon disappear. The 1958 penny was produced primarily at the Perth Mint, and the quality of striking varied somewhat, with many coins showing soft details or spotting issues. Collectors are especially drawn to coins that retain their full mint brilliance and sharp detail, particularly around the Queen's portrait and the kangaroo's body. Finding a flawless coin from this year can be surprisingly difficult, despite the large mintage. For collectors, the appeal of the 1958 penny lies not just in its scarcity at the top end, but also in its role as a nostalgic symbol of Australia's pre-decimal past. Many Australians who grew up in the 1950s remember the penny as part of their daily lives, and for them, it carries a sentimental connection as well. In the numismatic marketplace, circulated examples are inexpensive, but true mint state coins have seen their values rise significantly over the past 2 decades. A top-quality 1958 penny with full red luster and impeccable preservation has reached auction results of around $245,500 AUD, proving that collectors place immense value on pristine coins, even in years where circulation numbers were high. Number 4. 1960 Australian Penny. The 1960 Australian penny is a fascinating coin that sits at a pivotal moment in Australia's numismatic history. By this year, the country was preparing to move toward decimalization, which would officially arrive in 1966. The penny, with its iconic kangaroo designed by George Kruger Gray, continued to circulate in large numbers, but collectors still see this date as significant because it represents the end of an era where the penny was a household coin. The obverse features the portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, capturing her youthful image, as she had only been on the throne for less than a decade. Unlike earlier dates that suffered from limited mintage, the 1960 issue was struck in the millions at both the Melbourne and Perth mints. However, what makes this coin stand out is not its sheer numbers, but the fact that high-grade, fully lustrous specimens remain surprisingly scarce. Most examples were heavily circulated, tossed into pockets and exposed to wear. That's why mint state coins with blazing red or full brown red toning can fetch strong prices in the collector market. A fully uncirculated, high-grade 1960 penny can command around $165,000 AUD today, while most average circulated pieces are worth a small fraction of that. It's a prime example of how condition and eye appeal dictate the value of coins that otherwise exist in high numbers. For collectors, the 1960 penny is not just a coin, but a historical bookmark marking the dawn of Australia's modern coinage system. Number 3. 1961 Australian Penny. The 1961 Australian penny carries forward the legacy of the kangaroo design. Yet it's not just another date in the series. It's a coin that has earned its place in collector discussions due to its scarcity and high grades. With Queen Elizabeth II's portrait on the obverse, this penny reflects a young and vibrant monarchy, and the reverse continues to celebrate Australia's most iconic marsupial, a kangaroo in motion, symbolizing progress and strength. Struck at both the Melbourne and Perth mints, the 1961 penny had a healthy mintage, but survival in premium condition has proven challenging. The Perth mint produced coins that sometimes carried slightly weaker strikes, while the Melbourne issues were generally sharper, but still prone to bag marks and storage abrasions. Collectors today find that tracking down well-preserved, uncirculated examples with full brilliance is far more difficult than the raw numbers suggest. Most 1961 pennies circulated heavily during the early 1960s, and when decimal currency was introduced in 1966, many were simply retired, melted, or lost in drawers. This has left a gap in the market for pristine survivors. In terms of value, a coin in average circulated condition may not seem like much, but in mint state, especially those with blazing luster, the 1961 penny can bring in around $260,000 AUD at auction. The jump in value from worn examples to high-grade pieces makes this penny a thrilling chase for collectors. It's a testament to how survival rates matter far more than mintage figures alone when determining rarity. Number 2. 1963 Australian Penny. The 1963 Australian penny holds a special place as one of the very last pennies struck before decimalization. By this point, Australia's coinage was undergoing its final chapter in the pre-decimal era, and the 1963 issue represents one of the last full productions of the classic penny denomination, with the youthful bust of Queen Elizabeth II on the obverse, and the kangaroo proudly bounding across the reverse. The coin embodies both tradition and transition. The mintage was substantial, as both the Perth and Melbourne mints were still actively striking coins, but collectors prized this penny for its role in the end of an era. Coins from 1963 circulated heavily, and with decimalization just 3 years away, many were pulled from circulation and melted down, creating a noticeable shortage of high-quality survivors. Well-struck and fully lustrous 1963 pennies are much scarcer than expected, and this scarcity drives collector demand. In average circulated condition, the coin holds only modest value, but when we look at pristine examples in mint state, the story changes dramatically. In fact, high-grade examples of the 1963 penny have been known to sell for around $370,000 AUD at auction, reflecting how condition and historical context elevate its appeal. For collectors, this coin represents a tangible piece of Australian history, the swan song of the penny before decimal coins like the cent and dollar entered circulation. Owning a 1963 penny in pristine form is like holding a farewell to a century of tradition. Number 1. 1949 Australian Penny. At the top of our list, we find the 1949 Australian penny, a coin that represents not only post-war resilience, but also a turning point in Australia's economic and social history. World War II had ended just a few years earlier, and Australia was rebuilding itself, reshaping its industries, and transitioning into a modern society. Coinage reflected this shift, and the penny continued to serve as a backbone of daily commerce. The obverse of the 1949 penny features King George VI, wearing the crown, symbolizing stability after the turbulent war years. On the reverse, the kangaroo leaps forward as a reminder of progress and national identity. The 1949 penny was struck in large numbers, but it has earned a reputation as one of the more valuable mid-20th century issues due to its scarcity and pristine condition. Coins struck that year were heavily circulated, and many were not carefully stored. Over time, they developed heavy wear, dark toning, and corrosion. This makes it a real challenge to find high-grade, original specimens today. The Perth Mint and Melbourne Mint both struck coins, and subtle variations exist between them, which adds depth to collector interest. In terms of value, circulated 1949 pennies are affordable, but when you move into mint state territory, their value skyrockets. Well preserved, fully lustrous examples with sharp details can fetch as much as $0.5 million AUD in the current market, making it one of the top-performing coins of the late 1940s. Its historical context as a post-war issue, combined with its rarity and high grades, explains why the 1949 penny has captured the attention of collectors. Owning one is like holding a piece of Australia's rebirth, a symbol of hope and endurance minted into copper. If you enjoy learning about rare and valuable Australian coins, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss our deep dives into the fascinating world of coin collecting. Every coin has a story, and we're here to tell them all.